darkness lives on both sides of the law. Now TV presents HBO Originals, True Detective, Thursday night at 10:30 on ViuTV6. On the road to becoming the best in the field, we pledge to revamp the world through television. We pave roads between humans and nature. We speak the same language. We build a tunnel to the other side of the world. Reveal thought-provoking images that you can't look away.
Welcome to the ViuTV News Roundup.
ViuTV6. Connect the world. We are one.
Hello there and good evening to you. I'm Patrick Falk in Hong Kong. You're watching ViuTV News. Coming up on tonight's show, China's Premier Li Keqiang has officially appointed Carrie Lam as the city's next leader. Two Hong Kong Occupy movement supporters from Guangdong jailed by a mainland court. And ousted South Korean leader Park Geun-hye begins life behind bars. First up, China's Premier Li Keqiang has appointed Carrie Lam as the city's next leader. Lam will begin her term of office on July 1st. Li signed Lam's approval letter after receiving a report from Wang Guangya, director of the State Council's Hong Kong and Macau Affairs Office. Li said the election was carried out according to law and that it was a fair and open race. Wang said Lam's victory is a sign that she's trusted by different sectors of the city. He believes that Lam can unite the government and people from all walks of life, leading to a brighter future for Hong Kong. All right, turning to the mainland now, where two activists who supported the Hong Kong Occupy movement have been sentenced in Guangdong for inciting subversion. Former teacher Su Changlan was given 3 years behind bars. She posted messages on social media platform WeChat about the protests when they were taking place in 2014. Freelance writer Chen Chi-tang was sentenced to 4.5 years in jail. Chen showed up at the protests and had written articles about human rights. Their lawyer vowed to appeal the ruling, saying the court didn't allow the defense to add responses to the accusations. Well, Britt Clennett joined me in the studio earlier with more on that unfolding story.
Well, according to their lawyer, it took just 3 minutes to hand down the sentencing. The judge didn't even ask them if they wanted to appeal, and the defendants had no comment. They had no response to the judge's sentencing. Now, they, of course, accused of inciting subversion of state power. But here in Hong Kong, about 20 people protested outside Beijing's liaison office, including members of the Democratic Alliance, and civic parties. Kwok Ka-ki accused the mainland of violating its own constitution that calls for freedom of speech. The Alliance Secretary Lee Chuk-yen said it proves Beijing is tightening its grip on dissent. Now, it's not the first time people in the mainland have landed in hot water for supporting democracy movements in Hong Kong. Since the Occupy protests in 2014, a handful of people have been in trouble and detained, arrested for perhaps, posting support messages online, on Weibo, on WeChat. And human rights groups say that it's because of Guangzhou's closeness to Hong Kong that place is seen as a hotspot for activism.
Well, here in Hong Kong, retired police officer Franklin Chu pleaded not guilty to assaulting a passerby during the 2014 Occupy protests. Chu appeared at the West Kowloon court this morning amid cheers of police supporters there to back him. He was charged with assault, occasioning actual bodily harm after being filmed hitting a passerby with his baton. His lawyer questioned whether the case should go ahead since the alleged incident happened 2.5 years ago, and many people hold a biased view towards it. But the prosecutor argued witnesses and video clips will be presented in court. The case has been adjourned until June 9th. Chief Executive-elect Carrie Lam says it's unlikely she could form a female-majority cabinet. She was responding to expectations of a bigger female presence in office following her election win as the city's first woman CE. Speaking after she signed a required statement to declare she has no political affiliations, Lam said she's now meeting different people to form her cabinet. There are a number of female undersecretaries rumoured to be under consideration, but Lam was tight-lipped about potential candidates, only saying it's a big decision to make for all parties involved.
In the current political climate, to join a political team really requires a bit of courage. So I can only say that for those candidates which I feel they are very suitable, I will use my utmost effort to impress upon them and hopefully to inspire them to join the team. But it's not going to be an easy process. It's going on.
Secretary for Constitutional and Mainland Affairs Raymond Tam says he'd like to rest after this administration's term and perhaps explore a new career direction. He assured the public that no matter what happens, he won't be joining the business sector. Tam had worked closely with CE-elect Carrie Lam and Secretary for Justice Rimsky-Yuen to push forward political reform 2 years ago. Speaking frankly to press today, Tam admitted he'd hoped to implement universal suffrage in the city when he took up the role 5 years ago.
Carrie Lam is a very hard-working colleague. She is very devoted, of course. Our work pace is a bit different, but this is very normal. In the government, people who worked as administrative officers hope the team shared different thoughts when dealing with any issues. Then we will put our heads together to make decisions and implement them. So it's not about whether we can cooperate with each other at work.
All right, turning to South Korea now, where ousted President Park Geun-hye has been jailed over bribery charges. The 65-year-old is now the country's first democratically elected leader to be thrown out of office and imprisoned over a corruption scandal. Ryan Brooks has the story.
Disgraced, ousted, and now behind bars. After 8 hours of testimony, South Korea's ex-leader Park Geun-hye is now locked up in a Seoul detention center after a district judge approved a warrant for her arrest in the early hours of Friday. Park is being investigated on charges of bribery and extortion, the court backing a call from prosecutors to detain her, partly on concerns that she could try to destroy evidence. She can be held in the center for up to 20 days while investigators build a case to indict her, based on claims that she took money from major companies in exchange for political favors. One of those companies is Samsung, headed by J.Y. Lee, who's already been held for weeks in the same detention center. Park's alleged co-conspirator, Chae Soon-sil, is also there under lock and key. It's the type of environment the former president could get to know well if she ends up convicted. The crimes she's accused of could ultimately land her in jail for more than 10 years.
And staying in South Korea, the salvage ferry that sank 3 years ago, killing more than 300 people, has finally arrived at Mokpo port. For more on what that means for many who are still mourning in the country, we turn to Joseph Kim in Seoul.
After over 1,000 days, the Seoul ferry made it back to shore since it had tragically sank. 304 lives were lost in the incident, most of whom were teenagers on a school trip. And although it's still uncertain what caused the sinking, many suggest that negligence of public safety and corruption played a major role. The Seoul disaster has been a roller coaster for South Korea, with many initially supporting the victims' families to it becoming a polarized issue, with some feeling that it was affecting the economy. Since then, it has taken 3 years to raise and transport the sunken ship, all of which has happened amid a massive corruption scandal that impeached and has jailed President Park Geun-hye. The Seoul reaching land, however, is very significant as it could provide some closure to one of South Korea's largest maritime disasters in recent history. Still, for the victims' families, the salvage efforts have been another painful experience, with 9 bodies still unaccounted for.
Joseph Kim there in Seoul. Now, the body of the estranged half-brother of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is believed to have been taken back to his homeland. That's after an exchange deal with Kuala Lumpur to release its citizens. Kim Jong-nam's corpse was accompanied by a group of North Korean officials seen here arriving through a VIP gate in Beijing this morning. Relations soured between the two countries since Kim's murder at the Kuala Lumpur International Airport more than a month ago. Malaysian Prime Minister Najib Razak described negotiations which secured the release of its 9 citizens as very sensitive. And coming up next, the latest from the world of business. Okay, starting with market action here in Hong Kong. Stocks slipped in line with losses around the region, despite a positive lead from Wall Street and upbeat Chinese economic data. The HSI opened up more or less flat this morning, but ended the session down 0.8% at 24,111 points. Tech shares dragged, while there were some steep losses also for gaming picks, with Sands China and Galaxy Entertainment both ending deep in the red. Kunlun Energy led the gainers, rebounding from yesterday's sharp losses after the company took a hit because of lower LNG prices. Now, US President Donald Trump set the tone for a tense first meeting with President Xi Jinping with, yes, you guessed it, stinging tweets. In them, he said the US would no longer tolerate massive trade deficits and job losses. He added that the meeting, expected to center around North Korea and China's ambitions in the South China Sea, would be a very difficult one. Officials say the US president won't pull any punches at the meeting starting next Thursday, aimed at smoothing over ties between the two world powers following strong criticism of China during Trump's election campaign. And China had a message of its own ahead of the highly anticipated face-to-face between the leaders of the world's two biggest economies. Speaking in a news conference this morning, Vice Foreign Minister Zheng Zheguang said China doesn't have any policy to devalue its currency to promote exports. He added that China does not seek a trade surplus with the US and that it's willing to work to promote more balanced trade. But he said Washington should also boost measures to increase exports to China. And turning to other business headlines from around the world, Britain's Lloyds Bank says it's setting up a subsidiary in Brussels so it won't lose business when the UK leaves Europe. The lender is one of the first to announce such a move, coming just after Britain began its two-year countdown to Brexit. Brussels beat out other capitals to host a Lloyds subsidiary because of its strong regulatory framework. Hundreds of Argentine workers marched through downtown Buenos Aires to protest against President Mauricio Macri's free market policies. They're demanding a stop to widespread layoffs in public and private sectors and to allow free salary negotiations on a nationwide scale. They say the policies aren't helping to pick up the country's sluggish economy. Bumper box office takings for Beauty and the Beast in North America. The remake of the Disney classic is poised for a third straight week at the top of the market and is set to rake in an estimated $47 million. It's already earned close to $750 million worldwide. A classic indeed. Anyway, stay with us. There's plenty more to come on the show, including China shutting ivory factories and shops to end poaching.
On the road to becoming the best in the field, we pledge to revamp the world through television. We pave roads between humans and nature. We speak the same language. We build a tunnel to the other side of the world. Reveal thought-provoking images that you can't look away.
Welcome to the ViuTV News Roundup.
ViuTV6. Connect the world. We are one.
It's another pure grey morning. Don't know what the day is holding. And I get up hard and I walk right into the... Everyone I see just wants to walk with gritted teeth, but I just stand by and I wait my time. They say you jump on that lightning ball.
屬於你同屋企人嘅非凡旅程，由呢刻開始，一齊登上國際級海上度假村，盡情投入刺激水上派對，親身感受極上嘅5星級服務，輕鬆嘆盡全球美食，與摯愛一齊欣賞令你目不暇給嘅精彩表演。海洋航行者號、海洋讚禮號從香港雙輪出航，把握限時優惠，立即報名。非凡體驗盡在皇家加勒比。
After the death of his longtime police partner Morse, Lewis, now an inspector, returns to Oxford.
You were with Morse when we last met.
That's right, Mum.
Together with Detective Sergeant James Hathaway, the duo take on the elite criminal underworld of Oxford.
Tell me what it is I'm not seeing, Sergeant.
That ring he was wearing. the image on it. I've seen it before. What do you think?
Something's not right.
With Lewis's instinct and Hathaway's intellect, even the most intriguing crime case can be solved. Saturday night at 9:30 on ViuTV6. Dream large, live larger. Movie star Vincent Chase, together with his boys and trusty agent, show you how our Hollywood dream comes true. A glamorous journey of comedy, drama, reality, and bromance. Now TV presents HBO Originals, Entourage. Sunday night at 10:30 on ViuTV6.
Thanks for staying with us. Something for elephant lovers to cheer. China's shut a third of its ivory factories and stores in a major step to end the poaching of elephants. But as Ryan Brooks reports, Hong Kong may prove a big obstacle in the crackdown.
A milestone in the fight to end the ivory trade. China on Friday shutting down a third of its factories and retail stores selling tusks, the first step to an all-out ban by the end of the year. Conservationists say it's a key moment in the war on illegal elephant poaching. But as Reuters' Farah Master reports, there's a major loophole behind the headline.
So Hong Kong actually permits certain types of ivory to be imported into the city. So this is ivory that was originating from prior to an international ban that was in place in 1989. Hong Kong is one of the main feeder markets to China, and actually over 90% of the consumers who are buying the ivory in Hong Kong are from China. Hong Kong is not helping the problem by not changing their laws to coincide with how China is trying to end it, because it's on China's border. Obviously, there's going to be a huge black market still for the ivory.
Lawmakers in Hong Kong have been meeting this week to discuss a potential ban to phase out the ivory trade over 5 years, a time frame animal rights groups say is far too long. As the clock ticks down, the city's trade in black market ivory could grow rampant as the mainland shuts it out.
Now, in Xinjiang province, newly appointed Communist Party boss Chen Changguo has stepped up security to the point some say it's become draconian. Melanie Ralph reports.
Here in Xinjiang, weekly flag-raising ceremonies are required for the mostly Muslim Uyghurs who are asked to denounce religious extremism there. Alarm drills are daily, as are constant document checks for residents. With police kiosks on every corner, security here has stepped up since the violent ethnic riots in 2009. The incidents of attacks reported have declined markedly since, but state media say the threat remains high. With a recent video purportedly by the Islamic State group about planting its flag in China, Beijing is pushing its own war on terror against spreading Islamist extremism.
The Chinese government's resolve to safeguard the whole situation and ensure social stability and security of production and people's livelihood is beyond doubt.
But human rights groups say Xinjiang's new party boss, Chen Changguo, is taking draconian steps.
Since the new party secretary has come into power, it seems like they've doubled down on their strategy of stability above all else, including military force and, troops everywhere, surveillance everywhere, massive new hirings of police.
And the pressure is not just on the Uyghurs.
Over the past few months, they've apparently issued edicts to ban all sorts of prayer at home, not only for Uyghurs and Muslims, but actually also affecting Christians and even Buddhists. So there's massive restrictions on freedom of religion right now.
Ni worries that while the repressive approach could be effective in the short run, there's a risk of it backfiring in the long term.
OK, to news elsewhere. And the European Union has outlined its strategy for Britain's departure, suggesting trade negotiations could begin as soon as sufficient progress is made on a separation deal.
The talks, which are about to start, will be difficult, complex and sometimes even confrontational. There is no way around it. The EU27 does not and will not pursue a punitive approach. Brexit in itself is already punitive enough.
Regional towns along parts of Australia's east coast are rebuilding communities in the wake of tropical cyclone Debbie. Samantha Vardas has the latest.
If you've been praying for rain, please stop. That's the message from residents on Australia's east coast. Flash flooding on Friday forcing thousands to flee for a second day. The remnants of Cyclone Debbie being felt as extreme weather sweeps further south. Heavy rainfall has cut off roads, leaving people clinging to roofs in the state of New South Wales. One of the worst hit areas, the city of Lismore, where residents woke to the sound of flood sirens. By daybreak, their town was underwater, making it the worst flood the city's seen in nearly 20 years. 40,000 people have been forced to evacuate to higher ground as water rapidly rises to roof level in some areas. Thousands of schools have been closed, many businesses also shutting up shop until the coast is clear. But not everyone's hunkering down. Extreme sports junkies have been keen to test the waters, some pulling off a bit of engine-powered showboating, others just getting swept aside.
Okay, from weather chaos to political chaos in Venezuela, where President Nicolas Maduro was branded a dictator after the nation's highest court took power away from Congress. Neighbouring governments have denounced the acts and called on the socialist president to re-establish a separation of public powers. Here's Conway Gittins with the details.
Venezuela plunging further into chaos Thursday, with some calling President Nicolas Maduro's latest actions as nothing short of a coup d'etat. The Supreme Court stripping Congress of its powers, members of the National Assembly clashing with National Guardsmen outside the court, some opposition leaders branding Maduro a dictator, saying the Venezuelan court had dealt the final blows to democracy in the country. Assembly President Julio Borges calling the action nothing less than a government takeover.
It is a coup in every possible way. It is a dictatorship, and the entire world needs to help Venezuela right now. Sound the alarm in every democratic nation of the world.
Venezuela's Latin American neighbors voicing outrage at what is largely being seen as Maduro's move to seize more power as he grapples with dismal approval ratings brought on by a severe recession, soaring inflation, and acute shortages of food and medicine. But Maduro is defending the court's decisions. The latest, stripping Congress of the power to authorize him to create oil joint ventures, leaving Maduro alone to make or break deals which impact the entire country. The opposition is threatening a new round of protests this weekend. Previous demonstrations have drawn hundreds of thousands out into the streets.
And staying in South America, Cuba will only sell premium gasoline to tourists in April, according to a leaked government memo. Most vehicles in Cuba run on regular fuel, but modern cars run on the higher octane premium petrol. And the order to only sell to tourists is worrying those whose livelihoods could be affected, such as taxi drivers who are given modern cars. Many gas stations in Havana have already run out of the premium supply as key trade partner Venezuela suffers a fuel crunch. And replacements will be hard to find, with cash-strapped Cuba relying on the subsidized supplies from its socialist ally. Time now for a look at the latest from the world of sports. And kicking off with football, FIFA has announced its proposed slot allocation for the expanded 48-team World Cup. It includes increased places for Asian nations and also a 16 interzonal playoff tournament for 2 more spots. The proposals will be submitted to the FIFA Council at its next full meeting in Bahrain in May for a final decision. Matt Goodrick is our sports correspondent in London and brings us more.
Well, the 48-team tournament will come into effect at the 2026 World Cup, up from the 32 teams that has, of course, been standard for many years now. Why are FIFA doing this? Well, pure and simply to give the game more global appeal. The World Cup has often been accused of being dominated by the traditional powerhouses of Europe and South America. But now other areas of the world will get more of a look in under the recommendations. Oceania will be guaranteed a place, for example. Africa will have 9 qualified teams, up from 5. And great news for Asia, who would be given 8 places. That's up from 4 or 5. And that is really no great surprise as the world's football geography shifts, so FIFA has to move with the times. China is the obvious country that springs to mind, plowing huge investment into the beautiful game, of course. They were nowhere near qualifying at the last World Cup. That was in Brazil. But these new rules mean that qualification is now a distinct possibility. And one thing that would certainly capture the imagination of the Chinese public is seeing the national side regularly compete on the global stage.
Matt Gooderick there in London. And over in the US, football club Chicago Fire is getting a shake-up after it signed on Bastian Schweinsteiger as a midfielder. Schweinsteiger spent 13 seasons with Bayern Munich, where he won 8 Bundesliga titles, 7 German Cups and the Champions League in 2013. But his time under Jose Mourinho at Manchester United wasn't so successful as he was frozen out of the team before making the switch to Chicago. His immediate task is to help lift the team's track record. The Fire finished last in the MLS for the past 2 seasons. And moving on to the doping scandal, which has gripped the sporting scene. The IOC had disqualified Russian athletes from the 2012 London Olympics after retests of their samples came back positive for banned substances. The 4 tested positive for anabolic steroid trinibol included Victoria Valukiewicz, a triple jumper, hammer throwers Gulfia Kanavayeva and Maria Bespalova, and weightlifter Kazmurat Akayev. They will be stripped of their Olympic records, and Valukiewicz will have to return a diploma she received for competing in the Olympics. Moving closer to home, and the National Hockey League, or NHL, will host 2 preseason games in China as a run-up to the 2022 Winter Olympics. Come September, Los Angeles Kings and Vancouver Canucks will play exhibit games in Shanghai and Beijing. The NHL is the latest major sports league hoping to tap into the sports-loving Chinese market following the popularity of European soccer teams and the National Basketball Association. That's it from me for now. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye for tonight.
Coming up next, how to live to 100.